The Jungle: The Book That Hit America in the Stomach. The publication of the book The Jungle by Upton Sinclair played the most crucial role in the food safety reforms created by the U.S. government in the early 1900s by providing new knowledge of the unsafe and unhealthy practices in meatpacking plants, which angered the public, prompting an acceleration of improvements through legislation. The 1900s were a time when social activism and extreme reform actions were very frequent. This time period was known as the Progressive Era. The Progressive Era focused on exposing problems that were present within society. Most of these exposés were produced by muckrakers. Muckrakers were extremely important to the Progressive Era as they worked tirelessly to put together books, magazines, and articles that used in-depth evidence and factual information in order to argue the need for change. Upton Sinclair is considered to be one of the most influential and famous muckrakers during the 1900s, his most famous work being The Jungle. The plot of The Jungle follows an immigrant family who had relocated to Packingtown, Chicago for better opportunities. However, that is not what they received. Instead, they found that Packingtown was ruthless and that struggle was necessary in order to survive. The idea for the book originated from the newspaper Appeal to Reason in 1904. The newspaper provided Sinclair $500 to allow him to begin his project and efforts toward the exposure of the issues in meatpacking plants. The newspaper suggested to Upton Sinclair that he spend a year studying and gathering information in Packingtown about the working conditions and safety practices within their meatpacking plants. Sinclair pursued this suggestion and completed many months of research and investigation. Sinclair roamed the streets of Packingtown, the residential district next to the stockyards, and packing plants for 7 weeks. He worked tirelessly to gather immense amounts of undeniable evidence towards the issues in the plants. Once he had completed his research, he spent many months writing The Jungle based on what he had witnessed. On November 4, 1905, The Jungle was officially published. It became an international bestseller instantly. The news of the book and the contents spread through society like wildfire. The public was outraged at the information that was brought to light about the sanitation and contamination issues in meatpacking plants, and the demands began. The public demanded they were to be aware of what they were consuming and purchasing. They demanded that the food they were eating was safe. They demanded that change was to occur, and they believed that change should start with the government. Many organizations and groups began to form to advocate for reform. The General Federation of Women's Clubs created a committee of pure food. This committee petitioned and wrote letters directly to the President and Congress expressing their strong beliefs about the urgent need for change in meatpacking plants. Organizations such as the Pure Food Committee of the General Federation of Women's Clubs have received praise over the years for their efforts bringing these newly revealed issues to the attention of the government. According to many, these operations should be credited with bringing the issues of alteration and fraud to the direct attention of the President, Theodore Roosevelt. As a result, Roosevelt read the book for himself, and it was reported that he was extremely moved by the vivid pictures Sinclair created of the meatpacking plants and life within them. In addition to reading the book, Roosevelt received a direct letter from Sinclair himself on March 10, 1906. In this letter, Sinclair explained in great detail what he had witnessed. He stated, "I saw with my own eyes hams, which had been spoiled in pickles, being pumped full of chemicals to destroy the odor. I saw waste ends of smoked beef stored in barrels in a cellar, in a condition of filth which I could not describe. I saw rooms in which sausage was stored, with poisoned rats lying about." Sinclair's description and work was so surprising and horrific for not only the public, but also Roosevelt. Roosevelt was so affected that he too decided action was necessary immediately. From the time Roosevelt received Sinclair's letter, where he pleaded for acts be put in place to improve the industries, it only took about 4 months for him to ultimately sign 2 different acts, both regarding the meatpacking plants. On June 30, 1906, Roosevelt signed both the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act into place. Both the Senate and the House were in complete agreement that these acts were necessary for so many different reasons. First, the government needed to regain the trust of society. Sinclair's findings not only revealed the issues in meatpacking plants, but it also revealed the questionable practices of the government. It was discovered that there were indeed government officials who would go out to the meatpacking plants for inspections long before Sinclair made his trip to Packingtown. Many people had observed these officials completing the inspections, and this led them to feeling safe about the food they were consuming and purchasing. However, what they did not know was that these inspections were prompted by the meat industries. Each of these government officials were being paid to keep quiet about their observations and findings. The government was being run by special interest groups, and the public was oblivious. Sinclair reported the matter after directly witnessing these practices, and he stated, "I was told by the literary editor of a newspaper that had positive knowledge of the fact that the editor-in-chief of the paper had been diplomatically approached by the packers and requested not to notice my book." This quote proves that even though efforts were made to keep Sinclair's book under wraps, Sinclair succeeded in his exposure. He is the primary reason the public and the non-corrupt facets of the government gained the knowledge they needed to be influenced into improving the meatpacking industry. The second reason that there was extreme support for the passing of the act from the entire government was that they were aware of the need to create a new feeling of safety among the public and to satisfy the requests of the millions of protests that occurred around the world following the publication of The Jungle. Clearly, many were upset and distraught over the thought that the food they had been consuming was dangerous to themselves and their families. With this effect, regulation over the production of food was most certainly deemed necessary. As a result, the Pure Food and Drug Act was created to prohibit the sale of mislabeled products and adulterated food, which could have led to illness and become very dangerous for the public. The Meat Inspection Act was created to ensure that the meat sold to the public was processed in sanitary conditions and to regulate inspections of all meat products to determine whether or not it met health requirements. These acts are considered to be the breakthrough for the start of the complete reform of the meatpacking industry. Although many other acts followed to specifically fill in the holes that were left, the 1906 acts were the ultimate spark and the root of change. The 1906 acts reversed Congress's 27-year history of ignoring the conditions and need for change in the meat industry. Proposals for regulation and legislation related to food and drugs had been attempted since the middle of the 1800s, but had all been denied due to a lack of evidence and support for the matter. Sinclair was able to change this trend by providing an immense amount of factual information and evidence in a widely read book. Sinclair's The Jungle was a critical frontier in investigative journalism. The freedom of the press is a major component of an ideal democratic society. Through his writing, Sinclair mobilized the public to pressure the government to pass powerful legislation for the health and well-being of every American. Investigative journalism continues to keep our government accountable to the people and expose corruption. When asked about why his book gained so much popularity and sparked change, Sinclair commented, "I aimed at the public's heart, and by accident, I hit it in the stomach." Again, demonstrating the power of this frontiering work of investigative journalism in mobilizing change.